June. The airline says it plans to retain its domestic schedule of flights between Johannesburg and Cape Town with effect from the middle of next month. SAA says it's focusing on ensuring operational readiness to resume flights once permissible. This position, it says, will be reviewed on an ongoing basis. Customers will be able to use their tickets a full value as a credit for travel on any SAA service up to and including the 24th of March 2022. The airline will also permit a free name change if any individual customer no longer wishes to travel. All right, here's a reminder of our top stories on the lead. Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma rubbishes claims that she's linked to the tobacco underworld and further explains why cigarette sales will not be allowed. If you're revving up to get your favorite booze on Monday, don't get too excited. The Gauteng Health MEC is raising concerns. And we expose a jobs for cash scam where police are accused of taking bribes to remain silent. More on that story now. Imagine making 24,000 Rand a day by duping people into believing you can guarantee them jobs. Well, this week's Checkpoint exposes one such racket operating in downtown Johannesburg. An insider alleges that police take bribes from these scamsters who continue conning people with impunity. The show's Jabulile Mbata went undercover as a job seeker to expose the money for jobs scam. Take a look.
They sent me a message saying, no, we found the company for you. Come back, pay 450 Rand.
Thabo Khumalo, not his real name, was defrauded twice before infiltrating a money for jobs scam operating in the Johannesburg CBD. After speaking to several young people like him who'd been promised work with companies such as Transnet and Sasol by a man known only as Abraham, Checkpoint went undercover on the 18th of March to expose the racket. On arrival at a packed fifth floor of the Marcade building in downtown Joburg, everyone is required to produce a text message invitation to be interviewed. Abraham, the recruiter, conducts the interviews. Everyone has to pay 200 Rand for this certificate that supposedly qualifies you for the job you've applied for. Ours was for a store packer. A week later, we called the recruitment agency, DK Marketing Solutions, to find out why they hadn't got back to us.
Anytime say that you get it over the full details, but after 21 days.
Like other job seekers we'd spoken to, we were told to contact Dion Visser at IBI Security Services, a registered company in Centurion. Visser is alleged to be working with Abraham in the scam. Visser agreed to meet us, but instead of arriving as job seekers, we went there with our cameras. We found him in this office with none other than
Abraham.
Do you want to tell us what you're doing here today?
Yeah, we work for a supply chain, so we need some people to employ. I do all the interviews.
Why do you make people pay to get jobs?
To make people to pay to get jobs?
Yeah.
There is anyone who said he got a job after he paid?
Yes, we've got a number of case studies who have paid to get jobs.
I'm not doing this.
What do you mean? Are you not involved?
No, Mr. Johnny
He's involved. I'm not.
But you're here with him and you admitted that you're working here with him. So how are you not involved?
In their letter to Checkpoint, IBI denies any wrongdoing on the part of its employee. Police declined to respond to allegations made by an insider that they accept bribes from Abraham to turn a blind eye.
You can catch the full story on Checkpoint tonight at 10 p.m. on ENCA. Now, all of Gauteng, including COVID-19 hotspots, will move to level 3 come the 1st of June, but the provincial government will increase screening and testing in the most affected areas. But is that actually enough? Let's find out. Our reporter Manqoba Mqunu is following the story now. Manqoba, let's speak about the plan when it comes to the 3 hotspots in the province during level 3.
Well, certainly, Shahan, the officials saying that they will ramp up testing in all of these three metros as they were flagged, of course, by the president on Sunday as being some of the problematic areas in the country. So they're saying that they're going to be increasing the testing and the screening at malls, being the target, of course. They say these are the areas where you'll find a hive of activity and where most of these infections are likely to happen. Of course, they're saying that they're quite concerned about the surge in the number of infections. You will recall that in just 24 hours, there was over 220 people that have tested positive in Gauteng for COVID-19. But despite this, Shahan, the officials saying that all three metros will move to level 3 of the lockdown regulations. In fact, the MEC is saying that they cannot separate all of these metros because they are linked in terms of the economy and in terms of transport. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about this.
We've agreed as a province that we're all going to move at once. You know, we're not going to have a different metro moving to a different level and others going to another. We're all going to move from one level to another as a province because we're an integrated province. The economy is integrated. Our transport system is integrated. It will be much difficult if we're going to use that type of actual model. But we also have got a ward-based approach now where we're going to be focusing in the wards where we have infected individuals and have a number of contacts in those areas so that we're able to then get screening done at the ward-based level. And this will also be on top of what we're doing in terms of the shopping centers and other busy spaces like your taxi ranks and your bus station.
All right, so we know there's also contention around the selling of cigarettes. Government saying that still won't be allowed under level 3 of the lockdown. The Gauteng Health MEC has something else to worry about, and that is alcohol sales being allowed, though.
Indeed, Shahan, he says, of course, that the alcohol sale is one of the major issues that's keeping them awake as officials. The concerns, of course, being the fact that during the lockdown, when those lockdown regulations were implemented, they saw a decrease in the number of people that had been taken into their trauma units in terms of accidents, in terms of shootings, and as well as stabbing. So they're saying that with now the alcohol returning and the unbanning of the alcohol, they're expecting the numbers of people or patients who come into those trauma units to actually increase. And he says they are worried at this stage, at a time where they're expecting the numbers of COVID-19, of course, to increase during the winter season. So he says this will be a big headache for officials coming in these coming days as they fear that this could spike those numbers of patients in those wards. Let's take a listen to what he had to say, Shahan.
We are now worried because people will be allowed to have a bit of alcohol. It means another burden to our facilities. But we are hoping that going forward, the restriction and the sale of alcohol will still be highly regulated and will be stringently regulated and make sure that it's not available at any given time or to anyone.
All right, thanks for that, Mangoba Nkunu. Still to come here on the Lead Home Edition, 5.5 million coronavirus cases have been recorded around the world. The United States tops the infection numbers. More on that in a moment.
I've realized the best things in life aren't things.
With One Life Pure Life Plus cover, a 37-year-old man can get both life cover for himself and funeral cover for as many as 16 family members in one simple plan and save up to 28% on premiums. However you choose to grow, you'll never outgrow One Life. SMS SAVE to 38934 today.
The action never stops with World Sports Betting's new web and mobile live games. Try roulette, poker, baccarat, dice or Dreamcatcher, where you could win every 10 seconds. Play live lucky numbers with draws every 2 minutes or try betting on Monopoly or Deal or No Deal. Plus, try our new animated sports and racing. World Sports Betting, your one-stop gaming destination.
Durban is missing you. Let's take this time to recharge. Durban Durban is waiting to welcome you after lockdown. Be energized by the ocean, beach and bush. Discover Durban's adventures and tranquility. Play on the promenade and put the fun back in your life. Enjoy a township experience. Do the Inanda Heritage Trail. Explore Durban's cultural diversity. Stay at home and plan to create new memories. Visit Durban online. Durban's warm hospitality awaits you.
Good news. Clientele is giving free rewards to all loyal policyholders. Save on groceries, health and beauty, baby care, winter warmers, plus work and learning essentials. You can also study for free in the comfort of your own home. Short learning programs and high school learner support are available. All plans include free COVID-19 support. Clientele, safeguarding you now and into the future. SMS Protect to 42770 and we'll call you back. SMS now.
Welcome back. I'm Shahan Ramkisoon. We're broadcasting live from my home in Johannesburg as part of the social distancing campaign, rather. And let's go to this story now. It's outside of the coronavirus. A 59-year-old man accused of murdering his son and niece will remain behind bars. Andile Nzuzu appeared in the Lenasia Magistrates Court today on 2 counts of murder and defeating the ends of justice. Sekho Ajamahi is following the story for us. You were in court earlier and it was a pretty brief appearance.
Absolutely, Shahan. It was a very brief appearance for Andile Nzuzu. He will be back in court on the 1st of June. This is because he still needs to get legal representation, and then from there, this case will actually get underway.
So you also got a chance to speak to the family. What are they saying?
Well, they spoke about how disappointed they are. They are very, very sad at what happened. I spoke to the mom as well, and she's trying to understand as to what exactly happened on that particular fateful day. She says she did speak to her husband, Andile, about what exactly happened and asked why did he kill these children. And he says that he didn't kill them at all. And she says that they will be burying them in the Eastern Cape this coming weekend. But let us just take a listen to what she actually had to say.
Kusa investigator. Maku investigator yonke into ikhomba kuye. Isibhambe usesakhe. Namanga aloka khuluma manga. Makabhala statement. Ukhuluma la akhulume la. Makubuzwa ukuthi beka kuphi na. Uthi bekaye emoli eyolungisa ifoni. Abuya athi futhi bekaye emoli eyothenga amapilisi.
Do you forgive him if he did it?
I will never forgive him. Wow, I will never forgive him, ngomntanami. Even if he can rot in jail, all right. Ubulele umntanami. Ngesihluko, ngiyazi reason yokuthina. Ngifuna ukuthi umthetho uhambe indawo yawo, bamvalele noba ngafela khona ejail. Akadeserve ukuhlala phakathi kwabantwana bami. Ngoba
It is a shocking story. We're going to leave it right there. Sekho Ajamahi bringing that to us. Now, Hammanskraal residents near Pretoria could soon have clean water for the first time in years. Repairs at the Rooiwal wastewater treatment works are resuming. The repairs were stalled by petty political battles that went on for months. Lindelo Masekane is following this story for us. She joins us live from the studio. So, an oversight visit to the wastewater plant, but it's not the only one in need of an overhaul.
Certainly, Shahan. The Cocta MEC here in Gauteng, in fact, described the situation in Tshwane as a situation that's on the verge of a humanitarian disaster if the wastewater treatment plants in the city are not attended to as soon as possible. They are starting with the Rooiwal wastewater treatment plant, which over a number of years now has been in the media for distributing contaminated water to surrounding residents in Hammanskraal as well as the farming community. And we understand that there are at least 15 of these wastewater plants in and across the city of Tshwane that need an exact overhaul, like the one in the as Rooiwal, the Rooiwal rather wastewater treatment plant. Let's take a listen to what the MEC had to say.
The problem is not just in Hammanskraal, and in fact, if the 15 treatment plants are not attended to immediately, the whole of Tshwane is likely to be in the same situation as Hammanskraal. And that's why we must understand the agency and the importance of attending to those.
So do we know how long it'll take to complete this project and at what cost?
Well, the first phase of the project, Shahan, will take around 6 months in order to ensure that the technology that will provide at least some clean drinking water to residents can take place. But this whole project will take at least 2 years. The deadline is around June 2022 at a cost of over 2 billion rand. The first phase is going to cost just over 300 million rand. Let's take a listen to the representative from the company that's going to be taking on this project.
Phase 1, we will be building a PST where the MEC did the sword turning. These days you can see it's done in more fancier than a sword, a spade. That's the main construction project, but the rest of the project is a whole lot of refurbishment issues, and that is these digesters that you see behind us are going to be refurbished and installed with heating and mixing, which improves on the throughput, because then you don't have long retention times for your sludge in there.
Now, this is a very important question. Is anyone taking responsibility for the delays in the project?
Well, Shahan, as you'd know, that the city of Tshwane has been embattled in politics in terms of who wants to take ownership and governance of that particular city. And of course, the DA taking over in 2016 blamed a lot of the issues on its predecessors, which was the ANC government in power. And the issues of this particular water plant date back to when the ANC was still in governance. And I particularly asked the MEC around who will take responsibility for the mess that the city finds itself in, but he didn't want to be dragged in the politics, saying that that is not the issue at hand. What he's trying to do now is to solve those issues. Let's take a listen.
What you want to do is to say ANC failed and DA failed. So that's what we are saying, basically. And therefore, it's 1-1 or 0-0. No, that's not the point. So you are just being mechanical there. Some of the issues happened before 2016 elections. Some of them became more pronounced and worse after 2016, including land invasions and all that.
I'm really not sure how the MEC can say he doesn't want to be dragged into the politics of this when he's a politician who's ultimately responsible for oversight on this. But anyway, what relief has been provided to residents in the meantime during all this mess?
What we understand, of course, in the meantime, that water tankers have been distributed across those residents that need them the most. Just over 900 water tankers, as well as the farming community as well, that's been quite heavily affected. The crops have been basically non-existent since around 2007. And I spoke to one farmer, in fact, who says that he's really hoping that this particular project will be a success. Let's take a listen.
I understand is that something is going to happen because in the past, you can say 13 years, we have severe loss of crops, and our underwater groundwater is also polluted. We can't use any of the boreholes next to the river. They deliver with 6 trucks every day thousands of liters of water for the community. And that problem causes a lot of problems with our community because our income is also down with the polluting.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Our reporter, Slindelo Masikane. Global coronavirus cases have surpassed 5.5 million, with the United States taking the number 1 spot. That's according to data collated by the Johns Hopkins University. Now, the landmark figure was reached yesterday, almost 5 months after the first reported case in the Chinese city of Wuhan last December. The deadly spreading of the virus is affecting 213 countries and territories around the world. More than 340,000 people have died of COVID-19, while over 2 million have recovered. Still to come on the lead sport, find out why Stormers coach John Dobson is not pleased with some media reporting. Morena Matupi will have the details.
very special client. We're an NPO, so every cent that we save makes a difference.
Every cent that I save then goes back into the community.
And when we saw the savings, we're like, wow.
Call 08600 60,000 or go to outsurance.co.za.
The Huawei P40 Series 5G with Ultra Leica quad camera. Remove the unexpected with a simple tap. Capture the best part of every moment. Huawei P40 Series.
PMD offers comprehensive motor insurance for all South Africans. Meet Letabo. He's 24 and has just financed a 2017 Polo Vivo. He only pays 774 Rand per month with PMD's comprehensive cover. Plus, he enjoys lots of other prime benefits. Letabo chooses the amount of excess he wants to pay, and that excess reduces to zero over time. Soon, he will have zero excess to pay and will never worry about additional excess amounts if he claims. See, our plans suit yours. SMS MOTOR to 43813 and watch PMD save you money. PMD, fixed premiums.
I think South Africans have an indomitable human spirit, and it comes out during a crisis. We see people coming together, forgetting about their differences. We see, home executives doing their bit to help their neighbors out if possible. Also cleaners who are not working at this time still getting paid.
Do you want to tell us what you're doing here today?
Mr. Dionis here is coming to employ security.
This security company employee is implicated in a scam that can easily make 24,000 Rand a day, charging job seekers for placements that never happen.
So how are you not involved? Okay, how is he not involved? We need to question both of you. What is your involvement here?
Checkpoint tonight at 10 on ENCA.
Welcome back. Time now for the sport lead, and I'm joined by Moreno Motupi. So the Stormers coach John Dobson is not impressed with some media houses. Tell us why.
Shahan, he's not a happy man, is Coach Dobbo. And I mean, without exactly saying who it is he has an issue with, he has lambasted some media outlets for what he calls inaccurate stories. There's been a lot of speculation, Shahan, linking Stormers players with lucrative offers away from the union, mostly in Europe. After managing to hold on to World Player of the Year Peter Steph du Toit, who was linked with a move to Montpellier in France, Dobson is already now dealing with reports of a Bongi Mbonambi exit.
And then lastly, on the Bongi Mbonambi story, I can once again state categorically, and his contract's here with me, he has no get-out clause after Super Rugby in 2020, as reported. He's contracted until the 31st of October 2021, but he could activate an escape clause after Super Rugby or the British and Irish Lions tour next year, so that go ahead. A lot of the national players have these clauses in any way because they tend not to play Currie Cup. They're either playing for the Springboks or it's the start of the European season. They may be reaching the end of their journey here. Are we going to keep them here? It's financially prudent for us, should they ask for a release over this period, for us to entertain that possibility. So back to Bongi. I think it's probably best I quote the player himself, and this is what he says today. Just to set the record straight, I'm committed to the DHL Stormers until late 2021. The Bulls have made contact via my agent, but no decisions have been made. And that's Bongi himself.
All right, to football now. The German Bundesliga is playing their third round of matches since the resumption of the league.
They are, Shahan. This is a mouth-watering top-of-the-table clash between the champions Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund at the Signal Iduna Park. Shahan, on any given day, this particular match would have fans, just salivating because of how big these two clubs in Germany are. You've got the Bavarians, who will be without their injured Thiago Alcantara, while the black and yellow have since added Erling Braut Haaland, who's just scoring for fun out in Germany, to their squad since the last defeat to Bayern in the first round. Now, coach Lucien Favre's side is sitting 4 points behind Bayern.
Letztendlich ist das sind Statistiken und mit dem befasse ich mich nie. Also letztendlich ist jedes Spiel neu zu spielen und die Voraussetzungen sind anders als das, ich sag mal, im Hinspiel in München, als wir gewonnen haben. Der BVB hat einfach eine andere Mannschaft. Da sind 2 wichtige Spieler dazugekommen. Sie haben eine gute Stabilität in ihrem Team, haben auch sehr viel Selbstvertrauen. Also das sind Dinge, die man einfach auch so sieht.
Ja, Bayern ist schon auf ein sehr hohes Niveau, aber wie gesagt, für mich, jede Mannschaft hat seine Schwere und seine Stärke, das ist klar. Man muss nicht mehr darüber sprechen. Bayern ist Bayern, aber wir sind auch da. Wir haben vor einem Jahr hier auch gewonnen, im Supercup auch, und wir wollen weiter in diese Richtung.
And let's end with this. AC Milan could resume the season without one of its top players.
You'd think after 2 months of no sport, everybody would be fully fit, Shahan, but that's not the case. Now, with the government due to decide on Thursday if and when the Serie A season can restart, Milan have been dealt a major blow. Now, reports coming out of Italy suggesting that Zlatan Ibrahimovic pulled up at the end of the session with what looks like a calf muscle injury. He is, of course, 38 years old, so he'd be susceptible to such things. And he spent some time with Hammarby at home in Sweden after the suspension of the Italian matches in March due to this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the Rossoneri began their training last week after that 2-month break.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Morena Mutupi, thanks for that. Well, that's it from me, Shahan Ramkisoon, and the rest of the team. Sally Badet will have your headlines at the top of the hour. Thanks for visiting my home. Take care and stay safe.
It's really completely surreal working during this time. Driving to work is like a Sunday every single day. It's like a month of Sundays. Something that touched me recently was I stopped at a petrol station to get my petrol, and I looked at the petrol pump attendant, and he was cheerful and kind and friendly. And I just thought, what an extraordinary man.
Unlock your potential. Online learning gives you access to a world-class education, no matter where you are. Register now for our online courses and learn with Richfield.
It's 6 o'clock. Good evening and welcome. I'm Sally Baudet. This hour I'll be talking to Cape Town Mayor Dan Plato about his city's readiness for level 3 as the epicenter of COVID-19. Also speak to the head of health for the Western Cape after 49 deaths in that province in one day. But first, your headlines. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize rejects explanations that the Western Cape's high COVID-19 numbers are the result of more testing. At least 2 Cape Town primary schools shut down after teachers test positive for the virus. We'll get reaction from health officials in this hour. And Cooperative Governance Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma says there's enough scientific evidence to support the continued ban on tobacco sales. She also denies that she's friends with illegal cigarette traders. We start here. Health Minister Zweli Mkhize says people are ill-informed when it comes to how the testing of COVID-19 works. He says the surge in infections in the Western Cape is not due to more testing being done in that province.
The numbers of people that have increased in the Western Cape are people who have grown up, who have become positive. They're infected in clusters, in retail shops, in factories. Now that is unfortunately what may happen now as we ease the lockdown in different parts of the country. But why did it happen? It means that if somebody was not detected early, because many people are asymptomatic, there were the services that were essential services, food processing, factories for medicine production, and so on. But when that happened, each one of the people who was infected went back to their townships and villages and suburbs and spread the infection there. That's why we're having this kind of explosion we're seeing in the Western Cape. Now, that does not mean that the rest of the country did not benefit from the lockdown. It just means in this case, we need to then focus on a much more intensive approach, because now 65% of the infections are coming from Western Cape. It's got nothing to do with testing. We have checked that, and all the comments, some of the people are making comments, are ill-informed. The reality is that we've got more infections in the Western Cape, and that's what we must focus on, because it's already showing the trends in the Eastern Cape. The rest of the country will have the same thing if we don't manage to contain what's happening in the Western Cape.
That was our Health Minister speaking earlier today, and now I'm joined from Cape Town by the city's Mayor, Dan Plato. Good evening, Mayor. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like your response first to what our Health Minister had to say today, that people who were suggesting, and we know that the DA did suggest this, that the reason Cape Town had such high infection numbers is because they had a specific way of testing. Would you say that that is perhaps an outdated approach, that indeed Cape Town is in fact the epicenter of the disease where we stand now?
Well, I'm not going to dispute what the National Minister have said. I don't think now is the time to fight about who is right and that sort of thing. I think we're all into this, and we all have to make it work, and that is to contain the virus as far as possible. If there is gaps in the Western city of urgently look into that. The provincial government and the city of Cape Town, we're in talks almost every day. Last night was my last meeting with Premier Alan Bindi about the hotspots and on what else to do. This afternoon, I had an extensive meeting with the executive management team of Cape Town and to look into the issues raised by the national minister. So I just want to say we take note of what's been said from national government side. We assess and reassess, and if there is problems in our approach, we rectify those issues. And definitely, it's not a case that we are saying something different of what the national minister are saying. The issue is just that the virus is a going concern. It's ongoing. The peak for the Western Cape and for South Africa is around the corner. It is coming. And at the end of the day, I would love the city of Cape Town to avail much of its time to contain the virus as far as possible, to get into the communities, and that was the other issue, my message.
I agree with you. I just want to quickly finish up on this point because there are so many important things to talk about. Does the DA regret being a little, I think defensive is the right word, because the reality is the party was saying they weren't the epicenter. Cape Town was not the epicenter. Do you think that that was an unnecessary thing for the party to have done? We now see quite clearly that Cape Town is the epicenter of this virus.
Look, it was the case at the time. Initially, the city and the Western Cape was not the epicenter. That was only coming after a couple of weeks down the line, and we are now the epicenter. We accept that, and we accept that, look, our detection rate is, we believe it is highly professional. We believe we can the other provinces. We might even be 1 or 2 meters ahead of the other provinces with regard to the detection rate, despite the National Minister are saying. But at the end of the day, I think, and despite the of them.
Mayor, we are battling to hear you. I think our line has failed us. I'm going to ask our team to redial you. We'll come back to this interview in a moment. But let's stay in that part of the country because at least 2 Western Cape schools have been hit by COVID-19. This is a week, less than a week, in fact, before reopening for grade 7 and 12. One teacher from each school has tested positive for the virus. Meanwhile, Parkvale Primary School in Valhalla Park, Bishop Lavis, and the Hague Primary School in Delft are being deep cleaned. All other staff who came into contact with the teachers have been put into quarantine for the next 2 weeks. Parents, pupils and teachers are nervous about returning to school, of course, amid fears of the virus. Now, the Basic Education Department is concerned about the apparent theft of personal protective equipment meant for pupils and teachers. These items are important if the country's schools are to reopen safely next week. Parents and teacher unions have made it clear they will not support plans to return to school if the safety of children and educators cannot be guaranteed. Grade 7 and 12 are due to return on Monday.
It seems to be increasing, and it is quite disturbing. In KwaZulu-Natal, about 2 schools, the MEC reported that 2 schools were broken into within days after the deliveries were made, and the entire consignment in those 2 schools were stolen. But we also received a report from Gauteng, which also indicated that a school was broken into twice in less than 48 hours, and there again, the PPE material was stolen, and in Soweto, there was an attempted break-in as well. So this is something that is taking place now, which is actually making provinces nervous about when exactly to deliver the material. That's why
Quick follow-up, Mr. Mhlang, I'm sorry to interrupt your thought process. You've previously said to us that you are unable to provide security at schools. How are you going to protect these consignments then?
People break into the strong rooms. They use equipment to break in. So this means that we need to work together. Members of the communities need to work with the police to make sure that the perpetrators are brought to book, because the capacity to protect a school lies right there in the community where the school is located. So we need to do what we used to do in the past to protect our schools and make sure that no one breaks in and causes damage to the school. Right now, we've got 1,577. In fact, the number is increased. It's fast approaching 2,000 schools that would have been vandalized since the lockdown began, and that cannot be accepted. All of us need to work together to make sure that all these public facilities are protected.
Well, it seems we have reconnected with the Mayor of Cape Town, Dan Plato. Good evening once again, Mayor. Sorry about that. We do have a difficult connection tonight. We know that South Africa as a whole is gearing up to go to level 3, but obviously great concern about hotspots such as Cape Town. We saw today that a field hospital was set up in the Cape Town Convention Centre. So clearly there is great progress in trying to create centres where sick people can be taken. I would imagine, though, you're particularly concerned about poor areas such as Khayelitsha. I would like to ask you a little bit more. What specifically is the city doing in areas such as Khayelitsha to provide better sanitation facilities for people?
Look, The discussion I have every day with my frontline staff is exactly that. If the services is in place, the water, the sanitation, toilets get cleaned 3-4 times a week. Clean water gets provided almost every day by trucks, even driving into the informal settlement areas for people to wash their hands with clean water at least. And at the end of the day, sanitization material gets provided to the informal settlement communities on the Cape Flats and also in the informal settlement areas. That is an ongoing process, and for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, it will ongoing. At the end of the day, we hand out thousands and thousands of leaflets and pamphlets on a week-to-week basis to all the informal settlement areas, educating the public with regard to cleanliness, with regard to the clean environment, with regard to washing of the hands and wearing of the face mask and so forth. And all these drives from the City of Cape Town side will definitely continue.
Mayor, let's talk about transport in the city, especially next week where a lot of people are going to be going back to work and some of the grades will be going back to school. How confident are you that overcrowded trains and taxis will be compliant with the regulations around social distancing and sanitation?
I'm quite happy with the My City bus service. I think Golden Arrow on their part will do exactly the same, and that is to sanitize their buses, to sanitize, even we're talking about sanitization of even of the taxis. My counterpart at the provincial government, MEC Madikizela, visit the taxi ranks quite often to see to sanitization. This morning, I visit some of the My City bus stations to make sure sanitizers is available for passengers to enter the buses, and that the buses are not overcrowded, that there is safe distances. And definitely, I can't speak for Praza, but I think on the trains, that is a big worry for me, the amount of people in the carriages. That is something we will have to watch on Monday with more and more people coming to work and so forth. But definitely, we will engage Praza on that one to ensure that there is safe distances on the trains as well.
Are you concerned, and it does seem a little counterintuitive, as our infections go up every day, and in 24 hours the Western Cape had 49 deaths. Are you concerned that we're moving to level 3 at a time like this when we're seeing the virus really take hold in hotspots such as Cape Town? Do you think that perhaps the suggestion from the Health Minister that maybe certain hotspots will have to stay in lockdown 4 or even go back to 5?
Well, look, 49 deaths in one day is quite concerning. Looking at what's happening in other countries across the world where you see hundreds of deaths in one day, looking at Spain, for instance, and even America. But at the end of the day, that is something we don't want for Cape Town or for any other city in South Africa. At the end of the day, even with 10 deaths in one day, it's a concerning kind of an issue. But I can understand why government opened the economy a bit to enable people to work and to earn some form of a remuneration. I think that is equally important. People were just hungry, and the big fear was a riot for food and that sort of thing. But I think our government is quite responsive during these times. They will watch the situation across the country very, very carefully from Monday onwards. And I am of the opinion, if the situation wherever in South Africa worsens, we will have to get back to the drawing board and to the negotiating table and to say we need to come up with other alternative measures.
Well, thank you very much for your time and bearing with our difficult telephone lines. That is the Mayor of Cape Town, Dan Plato, talking to us. Now, we were expecting it to happen today, but it's going to happen tomorrow at around 12:30. We're expecting our Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, to talk to us about what lockdown level 3 actually means. But of course, she was speaking today in the NCOP, and she's denied claims that she is friends with cigarette trader Adriano Mazzotti. She was defending government's decision to continue the prohibition of tobacco product sales during level 3 of the lockdown.
I'm not Mazzotti's friend. And secondly, if anyone is doing crime in South Africa, they must be arrested. whatever crime, whether they are a crime on cigarettes or crime on what, those people who are doing crime must be arrested. Now, in terms of tobacco, I would go to town about tobacco, but I won't go to town very much because the matter is in court as we speak. But let me say that COVID-19 is a novel virus which affects the lungs, and we know from some of the studies that have come from China, and even some that are now coming from the US. There's even a paper also from Oxford, and that indeed people who smoke do have problems with the lungs, as we know, and if they do get the infection, they are more likely than the non-smokers to get a more serious disease.
Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa will address the nation this evening. He's leading a call for a national day of prayer. He's expected to give an update on provisions for the religious sector. The address is expected around 7:30, and of course we will bring it to you live here on ENCA. Still ahead this evening, municipal workers want more pay for delivering services during the lockdown. Stay with us for that.
Get away. Tahu, dokwa. Huli lelwa. Kanna tama. Dumela tao. Pula ena e tlisitse mathata. Miri ya koloba. Kutlwa ho thonyollotse. Hona bana.
Yeah. Jangan Ustaz. Mudah halo.
Sheba mona. O le boloketse yona.
Here's to the people who don't stop caring by serving lead the way. Here's to the cashiers, packers, cleaners, store managers who can. Here's to everyone who cares about this land. Big and praise, salute you. We care because you do. You keep this country going. You make this nation new.
Pick and Pay. Together, we can feed the nation.
Good news. Clientele is giving free rewards to all loyal policyholders. Save on groceries, health and beauty, baby care, winter warmers, plus work and learning essentials. You can also study for free in the comfort of your own home. Short learning programs and high school learner support are available. All plans include free COVID-19 support. Clientele, safeguarding you now and into the future. SMS care to 31042 and we'll call you back. SMS now.
Now, if you live on Gauteng's West Rand, you might have noticed a reduction in municipal services. That's because Mogale city workers are currently on a go-slow. They're demanding COVID-19 risk compensation, danger pay, I suppose, for working during the lockdown. The municipality says the process for making payments is underway, but employees insist they won't resume work until they are paid. ENCA's Linda Kuhle-Kulu has that story.
The smoke coming out of what was burning tires is just one of the traces of the protest that took place on Monday here. Municipal workers in Mogale City are demanding they be paid for the risk they've been taking working under COVID-19 lockdown. They say they will not be returning to work until their monies are reflected in their accounts. And what was happening was that from yesterday, they had been protesting outside here, burning tires. But yesterday there was a meeting between the city as well as the unions, and the city is appealing to some of the workers to say they must come back to work because of the essential services they are providing.
On Friday and Thursday, the workers would have demonstrated that they are displeased with the engagement between management. And yesterday it was resolved. So it's not that they were not paid their salary yesterday on Monday. They were paid their salary, and management would ensure that they received their COVID allowance. So I want to appeal to them, first and foremost, to protect their work. They are entitled, they have a right to protest, they have a right to strike, but there's also a responsibility in court.
In the Eastern Cape, angry Janssenville residents near Port Elizabeth took to the streets last night. They threatened to burn down the Sawas Memorial Hospital. They also threatened to set alight the home of the hospital CEO, Gillian January. Now, residents were angry after a patient who allegedly tested positive for COVID-19 was discharged and not placed in quarantine. They fear the person could further spread the virus, and they want their demands met. Now, the easing of the lockdown next week will not be enough to save the battered economy. Predictions by economists, the Treasury, the Reserve Bank and others show 3 million jobs could already have been lost. This is along with a 6% contraction in the economy during the hard lockdown. Analyst Maudi Letswanye says any relief efforts by government must be done correctly.
The biggest problem that I have is the implementation. Does that plan or those monies or those support packages, do they actually filter down to a business person who's looking for that funding, or is it just the planning? Because we also hear some numbers that are really shocking, that 2/3 of those that really need this money do not end up getting it, do not qualify either for whatever reasons. They don't get the money. And remember, it's not even about just getting the funds, it's about when do you get the funds. The time is of an important factor here. If you get the funds too late, you might not be able to save your company. So I think the implementation, it's where a lot of emphasis needs to be put on to make sure that those those small, medium enterprises do receive these funds at the right time.
Alcoholic beverage makers have asked government to allow smaller taverns to convert into drink collection points. This is the impact of lockdown restrictions is felt beyond the industry's players. Vinpro CEO Rika Bason says an estimated 117,000 jobs have been lost throughout the industry, and 13% of the craft beer sector is in the process of closing. The industry argues that allowing taverns in poorer communities to sell alcohol for home consumption will prevent local residents travelling long distances and also help reduce illicit sales. Restricted weekday sales of alcohol will be allowed from June the 1st under lockdown level 3. South African Airways plans to resume domestic flights as soon as it is given official approval by the government. But all planned scheduled flights on regional and international services will be cancelled, of course, until the end of June. The airline says it plans to retain its domestic schedule of flights between Johannesburg and Cape Town with effect from the middle of next month. SAA says it's focusing on ensuring operational readiness to resume flights once it's allowed. The position, it says, will be reviewed on an ongoing basis. Customers will be able to use their tickets' full value as a credit for travel on any SAA service up to and including the 24th of March 2022. The airline will also permit a free name change if any individual customer no longer wishes to travel. Now let's take a look at today's indicators. Still ahead, investigative program Checkpoint goes undercover to expose a money for jobs scam.
What you're doing here today? But you're here with him and you admitted that you're working here with him.
You protected, you taught, and you saved. Now let us do the same. We're protecting essential workers with free personal cover when traveling to and from work worth up to 100,000 Rand. Sign up for free today.
Your donation provides a healthy future for people with HIV and TB. SMS PILL to 43845. Doctors Without Borders.
And if you sign up for panic assistance, the nearest armed response is just a tap away. Come with us and get more out of life.
African Bank knows that this is a difficult time, so we've made sure that you can still bank safely from home. It pays to bank with MyWorld, where you get 6 accounts to share with your family, lowest transactional costs and no monthly account fees, best interest rates on positive balances, and you bank for free. Open an account in just 5 minutes. African Bank, we are you.
Unlock great savings at Dis-Chem now with 20% off sports supplements in-store or online at dischem.co.za. Extended to 7 days for your shopping convenience. Monday 25 to Sunday 31 May. Only at Dis-Chem. Pharmacists who care.
Best car insurance. Call now. Cheap, cheap, cheap. That's what I said. Cheapest car insurance in town.
What has delighted me the most is to see our government working together, trying to do something really to make sure that as a unit we save lives.
The law is not on lockdown, okay? So taking part in any illegal activity, which includes the buying and selling of alcohol, will land you in trouble. Be part of the solution.
Coming up for 6:30, let's just recap your top stories this evening. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize rejects explanations that the Western Cape's high COVID-19 numbers are the result of more testing. At least 2 Cape Town primary schools shut down after teachers test positive for the virus. We'll get reaction from health officials to that story. Cooperative Governance Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma says there is enough scientific evidence supporting a continued ban on tobacco sales during the COVID-19 pandemic. She's also denying that she's friends with illegal cigarette traders. To this, the SA Medical Research Council's board says its president, Professor Glenn de Grey, didn't breach any of the organisation's policies. This follows comments she made in a news article last week criticising parts of the COVID-19 lockdown. In a statement, the board says they've discussed the challenges relating to the media statements she made in her private capacity, and they will not be instituting any further investigation into the matter. The board has advised Professor Gray, the Health Minister, and the Ministerial Advisory Committee to resolve the issue. Gray has sent a statement thanking the board for its decision. She also reaffirms her commitment to doing all she can for the national effort against COVID-19. She says she'll remain at the disposal of the Minister of Health and the Ministerial Advisory Committee. Well, Professor Barney Pichana from the Academy of Science South Africa says academics need to do their research in a free environment without fear of interference.
The Medical Research Council totally misunderstood everything about it. First of all, Professor Gray was appointed a member of the MAC in her personal capacity. And secondly, there is nothing in the terms of reference of the MAC that says that members were not to address the media in any shape or form. There's nothing that prevents Professor Gray from addressing the media. So the Medical Research Council, in the first instance, had no business with this matter, which was actually Professor Gray acting in her personal capacity. Secondly, the Director General had no business writing to the chairperson of the Medical Research Council about Professor Gray's activities in her personal capacity, because that is a matter that the minister had already dealt with, and that brought that matter to the end. But more alarmingly, though, is that there's an attack on the integrity of a medical scientist just on the basis that she is perceived to be making utterances that are at odds with what the government has done. We are not saying she was right in what she said. We don't know. But we said she has a right to say what she did, because that is academic freedom.
Professor Barney Pichana speaking to Jeremy Maggs earlier today. Now, imagine making 24,000 Rand a day by duping people into believing you can guarantee them jobs. Well, this week's Checkpoint exposes one such racket operating in downtown Johannesburg. An insider alleges that police take bribes from the scamsters who continue conning people with impunity. The show's Jabulile Mbata went undercover as a job seeker to expose the Money for Jobs scam. Here's a preview.
They sent me a message saying, no, we found the company for you. Come back, pay 450 Rand.
Thabo Khumalo, not his real name, was defrauded twice before infiltrating a Money for Jobs scam operating in the Johannesburg CBD. After speaking to several young people like him who'd been promised work with companies such as Transnet and Sasol by a man known only as Abraham, Checkpoint went undercover on the 18th of March to expose the racket. On arrival at a packed 5th floor of the Marcade building in downtown Joburg, everyone is required to produce a text message invitation to be interviewed. Abraham, the recruiter, conducts the interviews. Everyone has to pay 200 Rand for this certificate that supposedly qualifies you for the job you've applied for. Ours was for a store packer. A week later, we called the recruitment agency, DK Marketing Solutions, to find out why they hadn't got back to us.
Anytime say that you'll get the full details back after 21 days.
Like other job seekers we'd spoken to, we were told to contact Dion Visser at IBI Security Services, a registered company in Centurion. Visser is alleged to be working with Abraham in the scam. Visser agreed to meet us, but instead of arriving as job seekers, we went there with our cameras. We found him in this office with none other than...
Do you want to tell us what you're doing here today?
Yeah, we work for a supply chain, so we need some people to employ. I do all the interviews.
Why do you make people pay to get jobs?
To make people to pay to get jobs?
Yeah.
There is anyone who said he got job after he paid?
Yes, we've got a number of case studies who have paid to get jobs.
I'm not doing this.
What do you mean? Are you not involved?
No, Mr. Johnny
is involved. I'm not.
But you're here with him and you admitted that you're working here with him. So how are you not involved?
In their letter to Checkpoint, IBI denies any wrongdoing on the part of its employee. Police declined to respond to allegations made by an insider that they accept bribes from Abraham to turn a blind eye.
That looks like a cracker of a show. You can catch the full Checkpoint episode at 10 o'clock tonight here on ENCA. Now, the Western Cape is the epicentre of COVID-19 in South Africa. 65% of the country's confirmed cases are in the province. As the country prepares to move to lockdown level 3, how ready are Western Cape hospitals to deal with the increasing number of infections? To tell us, we're joined by the Provincial Health Department's Dr. Keith Klutter. Good evening, Dr. Klutter. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to start with the 49 deaths in the Western Cape in one day from COVID-19. That is quite a shocking number. Is that just one bad day, or do you think this is the beginning of an increase in deaths? Must we get used to this sort of death toll?
Thank you very much, Sally. I just want to clarify the 49 deaths. It was over 2 days.
Okay.
And it was just the data being released to the National Department over 2 days. But we are in the phase where we are expecting upward of 30 deaths a day. And that is where we are in the acceleration of what's going to go ahead from here.
All right. Can you tell me whether the second patient to die under the age of 9 is in the Western Cape? And if so, can you tell us any more about that child?
Yes, there is a case under the age of 9. And that was a 2-year-old, and then it was a case which we obviously had comorbidities and all of those. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that information. When do you think the Western Cape, or specifically, I think it really is still mostly focused in the Cape Town area, going to hit the peak of the virus? It seems that it's going to come earlier to your part of the world than us here in Johannesburg.
Yes. At the moment, Sally, we are very much working with the Actuarial Society of South Africa. You would have noticed that they released some modelling, actuarial modelling. We're also working with MASHA. There's a national modelling group, and they released their models last week, 2 weeks ago. We are very much working with them, validating our parameters with them. We are looking at the moment towards peaking in June towards July. That is definitely earlier than other provinces in the country, but we are currently working towards June, July.
Okay. I wonder if you can update us on these hospitals. When we last spoke, you told me that there were 105 days. We also hear that Mediclinic Cape Town has had to close to new admissions due to 25 infections of COVID-19, 14 of which are staff. Could you just update us quickly on the hospital situation, including those key points?
Yeah. As you're rightfully saying, that there's two things that we consider in the hospitals. The first one is the actual number of cases admitted to the hospital. So as I explained, it was cases that is under investigation. We call it persons under investigation. Those have been increasing. And then out of the persons under investigation, it's then people that's admitted into COVID wards. and then people that is admitted for high care and for ICU. Since I spoke to you on Friday, those numbers have increased. Tygerberg and Groot Schuur are under significant pressure. Places like Mitchells Plain Hospital is also under pressure, and Khayelitsha Hospital, as well as the other acute hospitals in the metro. As you rightfully say, the private hospitals is also under significant pressure, and all of these numbers are starting to increase. The second thing that we're concerned about, which is probably the bigger concern for us, is that the rate of infection amongst healthcare workers are increasing in many of these hospitals as well. And that's why the figure of Tygerberg that we spoke about, of being more than 120 people being infected in Tygerberg Hospital, the rate is also increasing in Groot Schuur and other hospitals. So we're taking staff safety as a key element in this, and that is to make sure that we have clean surfaces. If somebody is positive, we make sure that we screen everybody. We possibly temporarily close down a section of the facility. And we make sure that everybody is looked after in terms of infections. So the big concern for us is not just that the cases are increasing, but also our healthcare workers are more exposed, both in the hospital, but also exposed in the community setting. Therefore, more of our healthcare workers are also in quarantine and isolation. And therefore, our staffing then becomes a big challenge in terms of managing the increased cases that's coming into the services. But I just also say to you, in addition to that, you might have picked up in the news today that the additional facilities that we are planning to open are progressing very well. And at the convention center, we're planning 850 beds. There's big progress being made, and are looking at the 8th of June, potentially taking our first patients into that 850 bed already.
Well, that is certainly very good news. Quick question, how many COVID-19 patients or suspected patients do you have at the moment? You had 500 plus on Friday. Has that number gone up?
Yes, I can confirm that more than 600 people are admitted into hospitals as we speak. So as I spoke to you on Friday, we were expecting that number to grow. It's more than 600 at the moment. When I spoke to you about the ICU admissions, that has gone up to more than 100 now across private and public. So those numbers are increasing as we're going. And it keeps up with the number of cases that's increasing, but also keeps up, as you rightfully say, that the number of deaths are also increasing.
I have to ask whether you're running out of tests. It's a major concern. Is it a concern for you as well?
Tests has been a huge concern. It's a countrywide concern. It's become a global concern. The big thing is that we have 3 NHLS, National Health Laboratory Service laboratories, public sector laboratories in the Western Cape. The backlog at those facilities have grown over the last 2 weeks because of the increased number of tests to quite staggering numbers, over 10,000 and 15,000 at one instance as well. I had a conversation with the CEO of the NHLS last night. They are redirecting some tests to the Western Cape to try and help us with the backlog for this coming week. Our priority in testing, you can imagine, is that the people that's in the hospital waiting to be admitted into the ward, it's quite important that we get a quick turnaround time for that result to help us with the intervention in the hospital as the hospital starts filling up. And secondly, very importantly for us, is when any health workers are exposed, that we can get the result back for the health worker as soon as possible. That helps us to actually manage in terms of what we do.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. We do appreciate it. That's the Western Cape's Head of Health, Dr. Keith Klutter. They're talking about 600 people admitted to hospital currently in that province with COVID-19 or suspected thereof. Over 100 people are in ICU this evening with COVID-19 in the Western Cape. Still ahead, we've got your sports news. Do South African unions have a future in Super Rugby after the COVID-19 pandemic? Morena Motupi with that story and more.
My nephew passed away after 2.5 years and all of way out. The process was so fast. I checked my phone, the money is in. I changed my life. All Life is a company we can trust.
All Life offers up to 10 million rand life cover for men and women living with HIV. SMS LIVING to 49210 or call now. Do it for you. Do it for your family.
Lotto Star brings you your chance to win huge instant payouts on the Instant Play games. Meet the Mega Cash Plus offering, an incredible 10 million rand payout. The Powerball Mini with a not-so-mini payout of up to 50 million rand. And the Super Cash with a staggering payout of up to 100 million rand. Your chance at instant millionaire status starts here. Lotto Star, your world of live games.
Pasta Polana, every day a different way.
Vitality members can get a Discovery branded face mask as a reward for achieving their weekly exercise, drive and money goals. For only 200 Discovery miles, you can get your Discovery fabric face mask at Dis-Chem and Take-A-Lot with Vitality Active Rewards. Stay healthy, stay rewarded, but most of all, stay safe with Discovery.
I know it's hard to be separated from loved ones, but now is not the time to visit them. Protect them by staying home. Be part of the solution.
A very good evening from the sports desk. The Springboks Stronger Together 32-12 campaign is in full swing. Members of the World Cup winning squad, along with coach Rassie Erasmus, have raised over R500,000 rands to date. Players are donating their memorabilia from last year's final against England, which took place in Japan. The aim is to raise 3.2 million rands, with the proceeds going towards combating COVID-19.
It's a great honor for me to be donating these few items. And what I'll be donating is my match day kit, my socks, my rugby shorts, match day rugby shorts, and a jersey.
I decided to accept the challenge all in South Africa. I decided to donate one of my boots I'm going to sign with the T-shirt, this one.
We should support this cause because there are a lot of people less fortunate than us. So join us together in supporting this amazing cause.
Speculation is rife that New Zealand and Australia are flirting with an idea of dumping South Africa out of the Super Rugby competition. Stormers coach John Dobson has reacted to those reports and believes that the product has deteriorated, but pulling a plug would be premature. It's been 2 months now since rugby was suspended due to the global health crisis.
Deteriorated over the last years is beyond doubt. But if we think back to that period which lasted so long, from about the mid-90s up until late 2000, the noughties, whatever you call them, 2010, it was a really good product. I mean, I think all of us would agree the first prize was that the best was Super 12, top 4, semi-final, final, over by end of May, no break for incoming tours. You had some availability of Springboks to the Currie Cup, and that was our best season, you know, and you had that window then for tours, and we could get to bigger tours as well, you know, like New Zealand and South Africa. But as regards, I think it's, you know, I've got a horrible feeling this cacophony of it's kind of is going to have some sway. But my understanding is that the deal's locked in, that it is Super Rugby in its current format for the foreseeable future by Sky. So again, I'm not an expert in that, but I think it would be premature for a complete plug pull.
There are 4 matches on match day 28 in the German Bundesliga tonight. The reigning champions Bayern Munich are out at Signal Iduna Park visiting title contenders Borussia Dortmund. This is in a mouth-watering tie that is currently on the go. Now we have the Bavarians who are heading into the encounter 4 points ahead of Lucien Favre's Chargers. Both sides have won both of their ties since the resumption of the league after a 2-month suspension due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the moment, the score is sitting at 0-0, so it's evenly poised after 17 minutes. Now, in one of 3 late kickoff games, fourth-placed Bayer Leverkusen welcome fellow UEFA Champions League spot hopefuls Wolfsburg. And that is where we leave it from the sports desk for now. Sally, back to you.
Thank you very much, Morena Matupi. More on the day's top stories in a short while. Of course, we are waiting for that presidential address as the president is expected to speak to faith groupings about how to worship during the lockdown level 3, which is due to come. And that, of course, a live picture. That's where the president is going to be sitting. He's due to make that address at around 7:30 this evening. But for now, quick look at your weather.
Ad agencies the world over have had to reinvent not only the way they work, but also how they think during the COVID-19 pandemic. How then has this impacted on the advertising and marketing operations? Or is it simply business as usual for creatives? Pepe Marais is one of the country's best-known creative minds and a founder of the Joe Public Agency Group. Pepe, a warm welcome to you. So first of all, the creative approach. Has it had to change? One would assume that your industry would be filled with early adopters who are delighted to do something different.
It's profound that in such a short time, over the period of the lockdown, that we can find so many new ways of working in a digital world that we've been existing in for so long. And it's going to be interesting to see if we maintain this way of working going forward, even beyond what we're experiencing at the moment.
Now, given in the creative industry, there's often a herd mentality. The best ideas come when people are sitting around a table and bouncing off each other. Is it more difficult, I wonder, to be creative during this time of lockdown?
It's an interesting question. You know, when I look at quality ideation, like high quality, I actually find that the kernel of the idea come out of very small teams. And then we expand those ideas more through collaboration. But the kernel, the original thought normally comes out of small teams. I find the response of my creative department exceptional. And the speed at which the people are working, like a complete new way of working. It's more high efficiency, more commitment. And one can argue, maybe it is because we're all feeling a bit nervous and we're trying to prove our worth. But it's been an exceptional experience for me. Look, we've used technology from day one. We rolled it out. We were actually off-site a week before the lockdown. We are feeling the need for personal connection, more movement. You know, the thing of sitting in one spot every day for 12 hours is starting to take a bit of its toll. You know, what's interesting is the experience of looking into people's homes. And when we actually review and we have team meetings, we get little peeps into each other's lives. So there's almost been like a heightened level of connection. And I feel a higher level of empathy and understanding, because some people really like engagement at work, but a lot of creative people are actually introvert.
I'm glad you said it and not me, because when I've participated in these meetings, Pepe, I've always enjoyed looking at what books people have got on their bookshelves behind them, which then begs the next question. As I talk to you, I see this beautiful painting or photograph behind you. Now's your chance to tell us what it's about.
That is a friend of mine, Ian Difford. He's a director in our industry and also a fine artist photographer, and that's one of his beautiful pieces of rocks. I've got two of his collection in my home, and he shot that on the west coast of South Africa. So well spotted. It's a beautiful piece.
It really is a beautiful piece of art. What about your relationship with your clients? Has that changed in any way from a creative perspective? Are they making different demands of you, I wonder?
Everyone had to start figuring out what is the brand's voice. How do we communicate to consumers? Consumers don't want to be sold products at the moment. Everyone is just desperately trying to figure things out at various levels. We're very aware also that we're at the top sort of 1% of this country in terms of earnings as an industry, and being very conscious of what the mass market is going through, because we can often put our lens and our experience onto what the mass market's actually experiencing. So really understanding that at a new level. And then whatever communication we create, which we have, we've been extremely busy. I mean, I've been busier than this is busiest I've been in 5 years. And the demand's been there, but I think there's also been an understanding that we're all figuring out this new world that we're entering together.
I think when we come out of this, the male grooming industry is also going to look very good, because I have never spoken to so many men before who've grown beards.
It is the funniest thing. It is the funniest thing. And also on top of it, I'm sitting at the river. So I'm 1 hour away from home, because of course I came here earlier and thought I'll get to snug back to Joburg, and I've been stuck here for some time. I feel like Yopi Adam. So yeah, it's funny.
All right, Pepe Marais, stay safe, and thank you very much for joining us. Now, the creative industry traditionally thrives during times of crisis, and it's our sense that coming out of this lockdown, we're going to see more innovation and more excitement in the brand space.
Next time on the home edition of Taking Stock, we're looking through the COVID-19 crisis and looking to solutions beyond the lockdowns as children prepare to go back to school. Government wants grade 7s and matrics to start reattending their classes, but it's a deeply contentious, complicated and fractious issue. We'll talk to somebody who works in the private education space on the next Taking Stock. We'll also talk to homeschoolers and wrap it up with Mary Metcalf, a former MEC for Education, who understands this sector better than most. That's all coming up next time on Taking Stock.
£7 good evening. Welcome to ENCA. I'm Sally Burdett. Now this hour we will speak to NGO Equal Education about the seeming great divide between the education department that's confident schools will be ready for a phased reopening next week and the unions, one of which is describing the decision to reopen schools as genocide. What is a parent to do? We will also speak to the Western Cape's head of education on the news today that at least 2 teachers have tested positive for COVID-19 and what exactly this means for the reopening plan. But first, your headlines. President Cyril Ramaphosa expected to call for a national day of prayer this hour. He'll be giving an update on provisions for religious bodies. That address is expected around 7:30 tonight. Western Cape hospitals are under severe strain. Over 100 people are in ICU tonight due to COVID-19 in that province. An infection of more medical staff is hampering the treatment of patients. This as the province gears up with new hospital structures being put in place in Convention Centre in Cape Town. And the Cooperative Governance Minister, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, says there's enough scientific evidence supporting a continued ban on tobacco sales. And she denies that she's friends with illegal cigarette traders. President Cyril Ramaphosa will address the nation this evening. He is leading a call for a national day of prayer. He's expected to give an update on provisions for the religious sector. As you recall, church gatherings have been banned. It's just deemed too risky in terms of transmission of COVID-19. So we'll hear what the president has to say to the faith community. The address expected at around 7:30. Of course, we will bring that to you live. With over 15,000 confirmed cases and more than 300 deaths, the Western Cape remains the province worst hit by COVID-19. Provincial authorities say they're working flat out to deal with the rapid spread as the fear of running out of hospital beds becomes very real. Aisha Ismail reports on the progress made in turning the Cape Town International Convention Centre into an emergency field hospital.
Exhibition halls converted into hospital wards. Contractors hard at work to meet the deadline, June 8.
We actually decided to go for 1,500, 1,400, and the CTRCC came up, and of course that was decided this would be quite a good space because it's already got infrastructure in place, and this became the biggest 850-bed facility, if you remember then, and so here we are, almost at completion. By next week Friday we'll be at completion.
3 additional temporary field hospitals that will provide more than 1,400 beds are also in progress.
This hospital will draw patients from any of the metro hospitals or clinics at the moment. So to get here, you could come from any. You could come from Khayelitsha, you could come from Mitchell's Plain, you could come from Tygerberg. So you could come from any of those hospitals to end up here.
Wendy says thousands of beds for quarantine and isolation centres have been procured. And as the country moves to lockdown level 3, concern is growing for the Western Cape, which has 65% of the country's infections and 7 out of every 10 deaths. And with winter setting in, it's only going to get worse. Aisha Ismail, Cape Town.
Western Cape health officials are concerned about the number of COVID-19 patients in ICU. The province's head of health says what's also worrying is the number of health workers now testing positive for the virus.
There's two things that we consider in the hospitals. The first one is the actual number of cases admitted to the hospital. So as I explained, it was cases that is under investigation. We call it persons under investigation. Those have been increasing. And then out of the persons under investigation, it's then people that's admitted into COVID wards and then people that is admitted for high care and for ICU. Since I spoke to you on Friday, those numbers have increased. Tygerberg and Groot Schuur are under significant pressure. Places like Mitchells Plain Hospital is also under pressure, and Khayelitsha Hospital, as well as the other acute hospitals in the metro. As you rightfully say, the private hospitals is also under significant pressure, and all of these numbers are starting to increase. The second thing that we're concerned about, which is probably the bigger concern for us, is that the rate of infection amongst healthcare workers are increasing in many of these hospitals as well. And that's why the figure of Tygerberg that we spoke about of being more than 120 people being infected in Tygerberg Hospital, the rate is also increasing in Groot Schuur and other hospitals.
Yeah, so that was the Western Cape's head of health, Dr. Keith Kluter, speaking to me a little earlier in the program. Let's now focus on education in the Western Cape. The news today that one, if not two teachers have tested positive for COVID-19. This as, of course, education authorities prepare to reopen schools next week. And to tell us more about that, I'm joined now by Provincial Education MEC Debbie Schaefer. Good evening, Ms. Schaefer. Thank you very much for your time. We've had sort of different reports around exactly how many teachers have tested positive for COVID-19. Could you just give us the very latest news on how many teachers in the province are now COVID-19 positive and how many schools this is going to impact?
At the moment, we've confirmed publicly that there are 4 schools where we have had COVID cases of teachers. That's the latest stats I've got.
All right. And do you know, are those all teachers that are positive at those 4 schools?
There are teachers that came to school and they did test positive, yeah.
I see. Now, did this was this picked up when the teachers came back, or did they know prior to this that they were positive?
No, it seems that they came to school with the infection already, not that they picked it up at school. Obviously, each case differs, and I don't have specifics on how each person got it. But the information that I have is that they didn't pick it up at school. They came to school, and it was picked up during the week when they were back at school.
Okay. Could you tell us the name of the schools and whether those schools will now be reopening on Monday?
I've got 4 schools: The Hague in Delft, Parkvale, Castelsvlei, and Wallisdean Primary School. What we have done is formulated a very detailed protocol that has to be complied with by every school in the event of a case being in a school. We have put all our circulars on our department website, and it can be found there under the Opening the Schools section there. So it gives very clear information as to what is to happen. It depends if an employee tastes positive or is exposed to someone who tests positive, then they've got to follow those protocols. It also depends on how close contact you've had. So it's not necessarily the case that the entire school will have to shut down, but places where those people have been will certainly have to be disinfected and properly sanitized. So we have put that in place. So just because somebody has been in contact, unless it's close contact, as in a handshake or a hug, for example, of someone with a positive case that has been confirmed, they will then have to self-isolate for 14 days, which obviously will affect them being able to be at school.
You know, yesterday we saw the stats, the death stats for COVID-19, and 49 people died in Cape Town. I've spoken to the head of health, Dr. Keith Kluter, who said this was over 2 days, but he is expecting in the region of upwards 30 deaths a day in the province going forward as the province moves up to its peak. Are you concerned about that in this province, that you're reopening schools at a time when the province is moving into its worst phase in terms of COVID-19?
We're concerned about COVID as a whole, absolutely, and any death is one too many. The thing is, we've got to look at it holistically across the province and across the country, and the decision has, at the end of the day, been made by the National Minister, but we have agreed with the decision given that schools have been closed for 2 months already. So we do need to look at all the factors. Obviously, the status of the infection at the moment in the provinces is a concern. But we also need to look at the purpose of having lockdown. And the purpose of having lockdown is to ensure really that our health facilities are equipped and able to prepare for the increase in cases. And it's very difficult to explain, and it's extremely complicated and complex and emotional. I understand that we're all feeling very nervous about it. But the fact of the matter is the teachers have already got COVID anyway before they even came to school. So they are going to get it anyway in communities, whether schools are open or whether they aren't open. So the reason why we're doing it in a phased approach is that only the grade 7s and the grade 12s will be back from the 1st of June. We will then be able to do all this proper social distancing protocols and health and hygiene requirements and then see how it goes. I think if there is any strong increase in number of infections, then that may have to change the way we look at it. But there are huge consequences for the length of time the school has been closed for many people who have to go to work and who haven't got anywhere for their children to go. So it's a real balancing act between the economy, saving lives, and also understanding that we cannot eliminate it completely. We can mitigate the risks, as Professor Karim has said repeatedly. We can mitigate the risks, but we cannot eliminate them entirely. So we are confident that we are taking absolutely every possible precaution we can. We're providing teachers with comorbidities to be able to make alternative arrangements. And children, if they do have comorbidities and that are at higher risk, then we will make arrangements for them to be able to work from home if their parents are happy with that. So I don't think we can really do much more than that. We do need to get the economy going again, and part of that is to enable people to get back to school.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate your time. That's Debbie Schaefer, Western Cape Education MEC, confirming that indeed 4 teachers have tested positive for COVID-19 in that province. It's affected 4 schools, and we will follow that story. Still ahead this evening, we continue our conversation on the reopening of schools with the organisation Equal Education. Stay with us.
Tahu, yo kwa. Huli lelwa. Kanna tama. Dumela tao. Pula ena e tlisitse mathata. Mme re a koloba. Go tloha ho thonyollotse. Ho jwale.
Yeah. Mudaungalo.
Sheba mona. O le boloketse yona.
Connecting at the front door. That's 10 out of 10. When the internet works harder than you, that's 10 out of 10. And when you and your partner sync, that's 10 out of 10. Get fiber that's 10 out of 10. Get MWeb fiber from only 399 Rand per month, 10 megabits per second, uncapped and unthrottled, with free installation, connection and router. Come home to MWeb. Come home to better internet.
PMD makes car insurance especially for you. Do you have car insurance?
No, I don't have insurance.
No, I'm not.
Fortunately, I don't.
No, I don't have car insurance.
No.
I don't.
Why not?
I'm looking for something different.
I don't know if I need it.
I can't get insurance at the right price. It's just too expensive.
PMD offers R500,000 third-party vehicle liability cover and includes growing cover for your vehicle starting at 165 Rand per month.
165 a month? Is that all? Aibo!
Wow, that is fantastic.
165 ka kgwedi? Ooh!
How does it work?
Your growing cover assists you in the event of a car accident, natural fire or disaster, and theft or hijacking. And cover can grow by as much as 4,000 Rand per month, plan dependent. So the longer you drive accident-free, the more cover you enjoy. PMD has a plan and price for you. All of this starting at just 165 Rand per month.
Ek is so opgewonde. Kan ek aansluit?
I'm really interested.
You?
Can I sign up now?
I would have done it yesterday.
That sounds good.
Plus, with PMD, you enjoy fixed premiums. SMS CAR to 43814 and we'll call you. PMD, fixed premiums.
Continue now with our focus on the reopening of schools. I'm joined by the NGO Equal Education, their Gauteng head, Zama Mthunzi. Good evening, Mr. Mthunzi. Thank you very much for your time. I was wondering if you could give us some perspective, particularly for parents who I think don't know what to do. On the one hand, last night I had a union leader saying that the reopening of schools was tantamount to genocide. On the other hand, I had the Gauteng MEC saying that they were confident all schools would be ready by Monday for that phased reopening. What, as an organisation that assesses schools all the time, what is your view?
Well, we're expecting chaos on comes the 1st of June. We think that the department continues to ignore, largely and overwhelming concerns from schooling communities, teacher unions, learner organizations, and parents. I mean, we've been seeing these concerns flooding in social media, flooding in terms of letters and meetings. And the department seems to say, no, by hell or high waters, we continue. And we think that's bad faith, and we think this is going to cause a disaster.
You say that they're ignoring, and yet we know for a fact that the unions and all stakeholders are being pulled into conversations about how to do this safely. So how can you say that they are ignoring the unions?
Firstly, that's false. I mean, we see that in many joint statements of the unions. But I mean, for me, I was sitting in a meeting now with a conversation with the MEC in Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, consulting the learner organizations. Firstly, let me tell you how that went through. He came in late, ran through a presentation quickly, didn't answer questions, didn't allow for other questions, follow-up questions, and then he left. So there is a false sense that the department wants to give out, and the unions have said it, and we've said it many times, that the department is not consulting, is running the whole thing in bad faith. There is an interior motive here to open schools, come hell or high waters.
What is
and
that?
We don't think that's
what is that ulterior motive? They keep saying safety first, safety first. What is the ulterior motive?
But I mean, of course, you can't just say it when people who are primarily deal with schooling every day are saying, but you're not ready. We haven't received the PPEs, we haven't received the water tanks, the teachers have not come. And I mean, the department even now still refuses to account for the time lost. Remember in the initial plan that the teachers were supposed to report to work on the 18th, it was moved on the 25th. Even on the 25th, many teachers didn't respond for work. And they're expecting that the teachers will just be ready with the learners on the 1st of June. We're thinking this doesn't work. I mean, the Limpopo Education MEC came out straight and honest and said, but the department is expecting us to go back to pit entries. Pit toilets and I don't know.
What is the average parent to do here in trying to assess whether they should send their child back to school? Because I think it's going to become a very individual choice. I know that Equal Education has published some guidelines. So just run us through what a parent must do in a situation like this where there's such a disparity in messages.
Well, firstly, we just think the whole plan of the department and guidelines is anti-poor. We know that the people who are going to struggle with going back to schools are learners from poor communities in the townships, in the informal settlement and the rural areas. The ones that come from better schools are going to be ready on the 1st of June. And that even if parents decide to send their learners to school, no learning is going to happen because there's no PPEs that have been set up in those schools. There's no water tanks that have been set up in those schools. And the teachers just are not going to teach. So the whole thing already, even before we start, we saw that some schools and communities in Cape Town were already closed down because of infections, and that the learners won't be learning anyway. And to take from the MEC of Limpopo to say it's unfair to say other learners must go first and others must stay behind, even if in an instance that all the learners will be required to write the same exam at the end of the day. The whole thing is just anti-poor.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time this evening. That was Zama Mthunzi. He's the head of Gauteng for the NGO Equal Education. So the country is bracing for level 3 lockdown. The president is set to speak in the next few minutes. That's about faith-based organisations. Officials will also hold a special briefing tomorrow to give us details. We've got some information on Sunday. Fair to say there are plenty of questions. Let's explore some of them with my colleague Michael Marilia joining me in studio now. Good evening, Michael. Now, the president's calling for prayer during his address tonight. We expect that at about 7:30. But he's also apparently going to speak about certain regulations.
Yeah, that's right, Sally. And of course, there are some burning questions related to those religious gatherings and a whole lot of other regulations relating to our lives under level 3 lockdown. And we'll get some information on that when there's a briefing at 12:30 tomorrow. The National Coronavirus Command Council holding a briefing just after lunchtime. But let's focus very quickly on the religious gatherings. Why is this so important, Sally? Well, there is a potential for the spread of the virus at these religious gatherings. If you look at South Korea, for instance, there was a big outbreak, a cluster outbreak in that country, which was linked to church gatherings, a church, in fact, in Seoul, and that sparked part of the outbreak in that country. So listen very closely to what the president has to say tonight at 7:30, because that will give us some indication as to how we are approaching regulations around churches, mosques, and temples. Let's focus very quickly on some of the other regulations, and we'll get clarity on these tomorrow, as I mentioned. How will the hotspots work? That's an important question, Sally, because we know the whole country is going to level 3, but there could be some restrictions, and particularly when it comes to movement in the so-called hotspot areas. Many of those areas, Sally, are the metros. Let's focus quickly on another question which South Africans will, of course, be asking, being South Africans. When will we be allowed to buy alcohol? Of course, we know that you can buy alcohol, but still not quite clear when exactly the trading hours will be. So during what hours and on what days can you actually get your booze? Let's focus on transport very quickly, Sally, because this is crucial to our economy, and the economy will be opening up. Will the Transport Minister insist on regulations when it comes to capacity? We know 70% is the key number when it comes to the capacity for the likes of taxis. We'll have to see if that stays in effect under level 3. And this one, quite interesting as well, Sally. Remember that? It's called an aeroplane. I think most of us have forgotten what it actually looks like. But the president says we should be able to fly under level 3, but only for business purposes. So we'll have to wait and see when exactly the aviation sector starts to open up. Interestingly enough, Sally, we did get a statement from SAA saying that it's starting to get ready for flights possibly in the middle of June. So not clear exactly what that means for the average Joe like us, but perhaps we could see some domestic flights starting to be available in a month's time.
What else are we expecting? I mean, could we see beaches being reopened, that sort of thing? Also the issue around domestic workers. At the moment, only live-in domestic workers are allowed, and of course au pairs and nannies if they're there for educational purposes. So what are we expecting?
Yeah, this is important, Sally, because of course domestic workers are generally a low-income demographic, and many of them would be desperate to put food on the table. So the question, of course, can all domestic workers now return? As you mentioned, live-in domestic workers have been able to work under level 4. Not quite clear where government is going to go with this, but certainly there will be a pressing demand from those employees to try to be able to get back to work if they can. But let's focus quickly, Sally, on another issue, and you touched on this during your Skype interview a few minutes ago. Are our schools safe? No doubt South Africans will want some clarity, both from the Command Council and I guess later on from the Education Minister, as to the procedures that will be in place when schools start to reopen. Of course, grade 7s and matrics going back to school on the 1st of June. So perhaps a long road, Sally, in terms of the clarity. We'll have to try and get some of that at 12:30 tomorrow as we focus on the times. That'll come up in our next graphic. 12:30 tomorrow, Sally, is the lockdown briefing, and before that, 7:30 p.m, the President leading that call for prayer and, of course, outlining the regulations for religious gatherings.
Yeah, you know, I'm wondering, we had that situation where we were told that cigarettes would be sold, and then we were told, no, that's not happening. We've been told that alcohol sales will be reopened under lockdown level 3, but I see that the health MEC, Bandile Masuku, saying he doesn't think that's a great idea. Do you think there's any chance that tomorrow at that briefing we might hear, actually, we've changed our minds, we're not selling booze?
Well, I think it would be a political disaster if government did that, Sally. I'm very interested to find out what South Africans are more concerned about, the religious gatherings or the rules around alcohol. I'll be devil's advocate and suggest perhaps the latter. But,
spirits and spirits. Thank you very much, Michael Marillion. Of course, President Ramaphosa set to address the nation in just a few moments' time. He's leading a call for a national day of prayer. And as Michael said, he's also going to hopefully give us an update on provisions for the religious sector, whether you will be able to go and worship at your local mosque or your shul or your church. So the President is due to speak this evening, any time from around 7:30. We will, of course, bring that to you live tonight.
Vitality members can get a Discovery-branded face mask as a reward for achieving their weekly exercise, drive and money goals. For only 200 Discovery miles, you can get your Discovery fabric face mask at Dis-Chem and Takealot with Vitality Active Rewards. Stay healthy, stay rewarded, but most of all, stay safe with Discovery.
The Huawei P40 Series 5G with Ultra Leica quad camera. Remove the unexpected with a simple tap. Capture the best part of every moment. Huawei P40 Series.
African Bank knows that this is a difficult time, so we've made sure that you can still bank safely from home. It pays to bank with MyWorld, where you get 6 accounts to share with your family, lowest transactional costs and no monthly account fees, best interest rate on positive balances, and you bank for free. Open an account in just 5 minutes. African Bank, we are you.
Unlock great savings at Dis-Chem now with 20% off sports supplements in-store or online at dischem.co.za. Extended to 7 days for your shopping convenience. Monday 25 to Sunday 31 May. Only at Dis-Chem. Pharmacists who care.
You protected, you taught, and you saved. Now let us do the same. We're protecting essential workers with free personal cover when traveling to and from work worth up to 100,000 Rand. Sign up for free today.
We are happy to let you know that all Hyundai dealerships are open again. All social distancing rules still apply, and to ensure your safety, hand sanitizers will be available. Our dealerships are disinfected daily too, and remember to wear your mask when paying us a visit. Visit your nearest Hyundai dealership today.
Good news. Clientele is giving free rewards to all loyal policyholders. Save on groceries, health and beauty, baby care, winter warmers, plus work and learning essentials. You can also study for free in the comfort of your own home. Short learning programs and high school learner support are available. All plans include free COVID-19 support. Clientele, safeguarding you now and into the future. SMS Protect to 42770 and we'll call you back. SMS now.
At this time, of course, we are waiting to hear from the President. He's due to make an address to faith-based organisations around the country. He will likely talk about a national day of prayer and also plans possibly to see if there's any chance for people to worship in groups. But first, this Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, has denied claims that she's friends with cigarette trader Adriano Mazzotti. Dlamini Zuma was defending government's decision to continue the prohibition of tobacco product sales during level 3 of the lockdown.
Mazzotti's friend. And secondly, if anyone is doing crime in South Africa, they must be arrested. Whatever crime, whether they are a crime on cigarettes or crime on what, those people who are doing crime must be arrested. Now, in terms of tobacco, I would go to town about tobacco, but I won't go to town very much because the matter is in court as we speak. But let me say that COVID-19 is a novel virus which affects the lungs, and we know from some of the studies that have come from China and even some that are now coming from the US. There's even a paper also from Oxford, and that indeed people who smoke do have problems with the lungs, as we know, and if they do get the infection, they are more likely than the non-smokers to get a more serious disease.
The Gauteng government insists all its metros will move to level 3 of the lockdown next week. That's despite the 3 big metros being flagged as COVID-19 hotspots. The province has nearly 3,000 cases, the second highest in the country after the Western Cape. But as Manqoba Mchunu reports, it's the unbanning of alcohol sales that's causing concern.
With 3 of Gauteng's metros identified as hotspots for COVID-19, health officials in the province say screenings like this one will become a norm. They, however, insist all the metros will move to level 3.
In Gauteng, we've agreed as a province that we're all going to move at once. You know, we're not going to have a different metro moving to a different level and others going to another. We're all going to move from one level to another as a province because we're an integrated province. The economy is integrated. Our transport system is integrated. It will be much difficult if we're going to use that type of actual model.
But it's the unbanning of alcohol on level 3 that's keeping authorities awake.
We are now worried because people will be allowed to have a bit of alcohol. It means another burden to our facilities. But we are hoping that going forward, the restriction and the...
And now straight to the President this evening.
In our country. Firstly, the call by religious leaders for a day of prayer as the country unites against the coronavirus pandemic. And secondly, the decisions of the National Coronavirus Command Council on proposals made by religious leaders on the gradual resumption of certain religious activities. The coronavirus pandemic has had a profound impact on all South Africans. Our Minister of Health today advised me that we now have over 20,000 people in our country who are infected and close to 500 people who have lost their lives. This continues to cause great distress amongst all of us as citizens of South Africa. At the same time, we are thankful that more than 11,000 people have recovered from coronavirus. Families are struggling to make ends meet. Businesses have been badly hit, and some have even had to shut down. People have lost their jobs and sources of income have dried up. Because of the restrictions under the nationwide lockdown, we have been unable to move around, to go to work, to study, to meet friends and family, and to attend religious services. Yet, even at this time of crisis, we have cared for each other, shown compassion and solidarity, and have sought to alleviate the plight of the most vulnerable in our country. This pandemic has also taken a toll on us emotionally and spiritually. It has shaken our sense of well-being and security. Many of us are anxious and fearful of both the present and the future. As a nation, we have a responsibility to respond to this aspect of the pandemic with as much effort and urgency as we have responded to the health crisis and as we have acted to relieve the economic and social effects on our people. We have a responsibility to also take care of the spiritual, psychological, and emotional well-being of all South Africans. In helping our nation to cope with these difficulties, we acknowledge and welcome the call that has been made by our religious leaders for a day of prayer. Prayer will comfort and strengthen us as we continue to confront this pandemic. When I addressed the nation on Sunday, I said that we've been discussing with the religious leaders who have made a number of proposals around a gradual resumption of some religious activities and the manner in which they would like to exercise their functions. The National Coronavirus Command Council discussed the proposals put to us by our religious leaders and has determined that we should accede to the proposals put forward in accordance with certain norms and standards. South Africans are a people of deep faith. Our faith is what has seen us through many dark times and has sustained us. We understand the great importance that the closure of places of worship have had on members of the faith community, and that this has worsened the distress of communities who are unable to worship in congregation. Our leaders in the faith community provide spiritual guidance, care, and counseling to millions of South Africans, and we are immensely grateful that from the beginning of our task in addressing this health crisis, they have stood with us and provided advice, guidance, support, and encouragement from the very beginning. The faith community is an integral part of South African life and has made a great contribution in the fight against the coronavirus. With our focus now on enabling our people to cope during this crisis and rebuilding our shattered economy, as well as assisting individuals and businesses whose livelihoods have been negatively impacted, we recognize and appreciate the important role the faith community has played in the provision of spiritual support and social relief. Much of it has been done under extremely difficult circumstances with minimal resources. In such a time of crisis, the noble values that are shared by all faith communities have truly come to the fore. Values of charity and doing good works, of helping the needy, of feeding the hungry, and caring for the sick. Although the nationwide lockdown has curtailed the activities of our faith-based organizations, we have strongly felt their presence. They have helped to keep our spirits up. They have encouraged us to remain focused. Above all, they have consistently reminded our people that the lockdown regulations are in place for the common good and the welfare of all of us. As we now prepare to move to coronavirus alert level 3, on the 1st of June, we recognize and appreciate their deep desire to return to their duties, to serve their communities, and to serve society. After consideration, following consultation with our religious leaders, we have therefore determined that as part of the regulations for alert level 3, the current restrictions on congregational worship will be eased in a carefully measured way. Places of worship may reopen subject to strict restrictions which are absolutely necessary if we are to prevent infections from rising in accordance with norms and standards that will be set out in the regulations. Churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, and other recognized places of worship may resume services, but these will be limited in size to 50 people or less, depending on the space available. Social distancing will have to be observed, and all worshippers and participants will have to wear face masks in line with the current regulations. All religious organizations must put protocols in place for, among other things, thoroughly cleaning and sanitizing places of worship before and after services. Our faith communities must ensure that any religious rituals that carry even the slightest possibility of exposing worshippers to risk should be avoided, and that where they form an essential part of religious practice, that sanitation is paramount. Our religious leaders will be recognized as essential religious frontline workers for purposes of spiritual counseling to members of their faith organizations. Religious leaders will continue to officiate at funerals of no more than 50 people. Our religious leaders occupy positions of immense trust and authority in our communities and need to play a proactive role in raising the level of public awareness around the coronavirus in their services, in faith communication groups, and through their pastoral work and activities. We welcome the offers that our religious leaders have made to make their facilities available for the fight against coronavirus by providing additional space for school lessons, for quarantine, for screening and testing, and for places of shelter for survivors of gender-based violence. This we are grateful for. This new phase of managing the coronavirus as a constant in our daily lives will be in many respects more difficult. It demands vigilance, and it will continue to demand sacrifices of all of us. The social distancing and hygiene measures that are in place under the lockdown will have to continue way into the future and cannot be abandoned or compromised. Let us continue to be guided by the overriding principle of doing whatever it takes to preserve life. Our faith-based organizations have shown in both word and deed their commitment to the national effort to combat this virus. We will continue to engage with various constituencies across society around their concerns and deal with the suggestions they are making to move safely towards easing various restrictions. Throughout this difficult time, we have remained firm and united. Yet we know the race is far from won, and that the collective energies and efforts of all our people will be needed now as never before. I therefore urge all South Africans to heed the call of the leaders of our various faith communities for a national day of prayer, which they have delineated as Sunday, the 31st of May, when we will once again come together to pray for the healing of our land and the protection of our people. On this day, wherever we may be, I call upon all of us to turn our thoughts to all those who have been affected by this pandemic, to also turn our thoughts to the families of those who have lost their loved ones. On this day, we should remember those who are working to keep us safe, those who are suffering and grieving. Whether you are a person of faith or not, there is one belief that unites us, and that is our belief in South Africa, in its people, in their courage, and in their ability to overcome even the greatest of tribulations. As we worked tirelessly to heal the divisions of the past, so too will our united action bring us healing from this pandemic. May God continue to bless South Africa and protect her people. I thank you once again.
Well, there you have it, the brief address from our president, and I'll just recap the big news, of course, is that under lockdown level 3, the president says that religious gatherings are allowed. However, there are very strict conditions. Places of worship will be reopened from the 1st of June, limited to 50 people or less, and that is dependent on the space. So if you have a very small space, it will be has to adhere to social distancing rules, which means at least sort of 1.5 to 2 meters between each person. Face masks, absolutely compulsory when you go to that church service. Protocols to clean the place of worship before and after the gathering. And then interestingly, he says rituals that could expose risk should be avoided, or clear sanitation if that is integral to the part of the service. I'm thinking, of course, of things like Holy Communion. Is he saying that Holy Communion should be stopped during this time, or is it okay to carry on with that Holy Communion provided it's very carefully done? You know, the passing of the cup during Holy Communion, that would have to be very carefully managed if it is to go ahead. Of course, it also raises questions. Does this mean that weddings can go ahead if the party is less than 50? What about baptisms? So we are going to find out all of those details. But also a really special tone that the president showed incredible gratitude to the community of faith from South Africa, that they have helped so much in the fight against COVID-19, providing food and shelter to many people in desperate need, and really reiterating that South Africa is a nation of deep faith. And then ending with the message that the 31st of May is going to be a national day of prayer here in South Africa. And we are to remember that we have lost many people already, close on 500 now. It's moving up to that grim milestone to COVID-19. But also to remember and show our gratitude to those who are fighting on the front lines of COVID-19, the essential workers, the people in the hospitals who are exposing themselves to risk to care for others. So a very important message there from our president, and we will get reaction to what he says and find out the details of how these faith gatherings are going to resume safely under lockdown level 3. Now, let's move on now. And if you live on Joburg's West Rand, you might have noticed a reduction in municipal services of late. That's because Mohali city workers are currently on a go-slow. They're demanding COVID-19 risk compensation for working during the lockdown. The municipality says the process for making payments is underway, but employees insist they won't resume work until they are paid. ENCA's Linda Kulu has that story.
The smoke coming out of what was burning tires is just one of the traces of the protest that took place on Monday here. Municipal workers in Mohale City are demanding they be paid for the risk they've been taking working under COVID-19 lockdown. They say they will not be returning to work until their monies are reflected in their accounts. And what was happening was that from yesterday, they had been protesting outside here, burning tires. But yesterday there was a meeting between the city as well as the unions, and the city is appealing to some of the workers to say they must come back to work because of the essential services they are providing.
On Friday and Thursday, the workers would have demonstrated that they are displeased with the engagement between management. And yesterday it was resolved. So it's not that they were not paid their salary yesterday on Monday. They were paid their salary, and management would ensure that they received their COVID allowance. So I want to appeal to them. First and foremost, to protect their work. They are entitled, they have a right to protest, they have a right to strike, but there's also a responsibility in court.
Let's move back to the presidential address that we heard a few moments ago, leading a call for a national day of prayer as the country navigates its way through the COVID-19 pandemic. That day will be the 31st of May. He's also clarified provisions for religious organizations. Let's get some reaction now. We're joined by Sheikh Ihsan Talib, president of the United Ulama Council of South Africa. He also represents the Muslim Judicial Council. Good evening, Sheikh, and thank you very much for your time this evening. I would imagine that you are very pleased to hear the announcement that religious gatherings are now to be allowed.
Yeah, thank you very much. In actual fact, this is good news for us as South African citizens. I think right from the start of this pandemic, the faith communities have dutifully found it important that they play a supportive role to government in order to ensure that the ultimate objective of saving lives, and of course to ensure that the purposes and the objectives of the lockdown measures and the regulations are being achieved. And of course we were all as a nation very focused on the whole idea of flattening the curve, etc. We've of course had many changes at the same time. And I think as the country is moving, to lower levels of restrictions, and we are looking at 1st of June to become a national sort of alert level of at level 3. And so it was, I suppose, something very natural, but also something which is going to be of good solace and consolation to many faith communities and millions of adherents of different faiths in our country. So yes, this is good news, but of course, we remain vigilant of the fact that paramount to all of this is preservation of lives, as well as the important, almost in a sense, countervailing consideration, which is also the preservation of people's livelihoods.
Absolutely. Let's move into how it's going to happen. Now, the President said that the National Command Council took on board a proposal from the faith-based communities. So I would imagine that you've all thought carefully about your rituals and how to conduct them safely. Does this mean, for example, that a wedding can now take place in a church or in a mosque under these new regulations, provided it's less than 50 people?
Yeah, look, of course, I think going forward also right now, there would have to be further defining and refining of precisely the nature of the kind of congregational gatherings that we are referring to. But I think first and foremost, as faith communities, we remain reminded of our responsibility here to ensure, as the President had alluded, that no one from among the faith communities, no one from the congregants, whether it's mosques or churches or synagogues and temples, be exposed to unnecessary risk or to any risk. That is paramount. And so in this current conversation also, as well as the status quo ante, in other words, before the easing of regulations and the lowering of the lockdown levels, we have forever and always made it a primary requirement that the approach is led by the expertise of our health professionals. So the expertise of the health professionals is what has guided us right from the start. And right now as well, when we are considering, as the country is beginning to open up, the economy is starting to open up, and of course also other sectors are opening up, how we would then go into back into congregational prayers in a very, very graded manner. And that itself has been a process that had been led by the expertise of our health professionals.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. That was a sheikh from the United Ulama Council of South Africa, also representing the Muslim Judicial Council this evening. That was Sheikh Ihsan Talib. More on this in a moment. Stay with us.
African Bank knows that this is a difficult time, so we've made sure that you can still bank safely from home. It pays to bank with MyWorld, where you get 6 accounts to share with your family, lowest transactional costs and no monthly account fees, best interest rates on positive balances, and you bank for free. Open an account in just 5 minutes. African Bank, we are you.
You may think that your dishes are hygienically clean, but did you know that the water temperature needed to kill germs on your dishes is far too hot for your hands? Only dishwashers reach the temperature needed to kill harmful germs. And with the cleaning power of Finish Quantum, it removes even the toughest dried-on stains. For hygienically clean and sparkling dishes.
I think there's something special about South Africa. Being successful when you've got all odds against you means that much more. Okay, so there's a lot of news coming out very fast. The big answer that they're waiting for is the Olympics going to be cancelled or will it be postponed?
One theme you'll find throughout all the South African crews is that there's the sense of whatever our circumstance, we need to rise above it. To see that lightweight fall bring the Olympic gold, I just remember watching the race being like, wow, we're good at this.
It was just like this magic story of 18 months from finishing the chemo to racing at the Olympics.
It starts by grooming one kid. That one kid will groom the other kid. I think that could change the country.
I don't think I'd be here if I wasn't striving for an Olympic gold.
At a time when we can't physically join hands, it'll take all our hands to fight this invisible enemy. Hands to prevent and detect it. Hands to care for the sick. Hands to help those whose livelihoods have been affected. Outvest, as an official partner of the President's Solidarity Fund, asks you to offer your helping hand. Simply go to outvest.co.za and click Donate. Because the future of our nation is in all our hands. Powered by Outsurance.
Well, good to have you with us here on ENCA this evening. I'm Gareth Edwards. Breaking news to bring to you in the moment regarding the religious sector here in South Africa. First, let's bring you our top stories this evening. President Cyril Ramaphosa changes regulations for Alert Level 3 to allow places of worship to resume services, but there are strict guidelines. We'll bring you reaction throughout this evening. Cape Town in a rush to prepare more hospital beds as the number of COVID-19 patients in intensive care tops 100. And we expose a money for jobs scam where police are accused of taking bribes to remain silent. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa is allowing religious gatherings from next week when the country moves to Alert Level 3, but only under strict guidelines.
After consideration, following consultation with our religious leaders, we have therefore determined that as part of the regulations for Alert Level 3, the current restrictions on congregational worship will be eased in a carefully measured way. Places of worship may reopen subject to strict restrictions which are absolutely necessary if we are to prevent infections from rising in accordance with norms and standards that will be set out in the regulations.
Well, as we just heard, President Cyril Ramaphosa has also made a call for a national day of prayer. Let's get a reaction from this evening's address by the President. I'm joined by African Democratic Party leader, Reverend Kenneth Mashwe. Reverend, good evening to you. Thank you for your time. What's your reaction? I imagine excited to hear that churches can now begin again under Level 3.
Good evening to all the listeners. I'm sure as you are looking at my face, I have a smile. I feel vindicated because some people said I was irresponsible to call for churches to be opened, but I'm glad that the President and his team have allowed common sense to prevail, because human beings are not just bodies, but they have spirits that need to be addressed and to be taken care of. So I'm delighted on behalf of the ACDP and the churches in South Africa that have been praying and crying and making submissions and saying, please, please, please allow us to meet also to worship together. And we are willing to follow all the strict protocols that will impose on us, but just allow us to go back to church to worship. And I'm grateful that the President has done exactly that. And secondly, I welcome his call to the nation to use the 31st of May as a day of national prayer. What I need to remind the President and the people of South Africa that when you pray for the nation, 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 14 says, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves, seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven. I will forgive their sins and heal their land. If we want to see healing in our land, then we have to follow the advice that God is giving us in this wonderful book, 2 Chronicles 7:14. We should turn from our wicked ways as the nation. The Lord promises to forgive us our sins and heal our land. So I welcome this good news that the President has given the nation today.
Reverend, I do think we need to unpack some of the details around this. Obviously, very excited news. We can hear that. And many people wanting to get back to church. There are obviously very strict regulations, which we are aware of now. I'm sure there will be more clarity in the days to come. But people are going to ask questions. How is a church going to be able to practically put in place social distancing when it comes to large congregations? How do you imagine this is going to work?
You know, a week before lockdown, churches were already told that only a maximum of 100 people should meet in the church. And many churches complied with that. They measured the distances between seats. Fortunately, we have seats that are movable in some of our congregations and some of our church buildings, so it was easy to do that. And when people would come into the service, then every one of them would be sanitized at the door. So those days we didn't have face masks, but we did sanitation, and then we ensured that there is social distancing in the congregation. So it has gone well, and I don't think that will be a problem.
And speak to me, Reverend, about communion. How is the church going to handle communion, which many people know to be critical to their blessings in church?
Well, obviously, sanitation is important, as I said. We will use gloves. And in our church and in many other churches, people don't share one cup. They are individual cups. So those cups also will be sanitized, and people who will be serving communion will be wearing gloves to make sure that they do not cause any harm, or they do not cause any damage that will make any person to doubt that what they are going to receive is going to be clean and acceptable.
I've just seen a question coming through on the ENCA Twitter account, Reverend, that perhaps you can help answer. If the churches are only limited to 100 congregants or thereabouts per service, do you think churches are going to have more services per day, or are they going to try and just stick to either a morning and or an evening service? Some of these churches have thousands and thousands of members. How do they try and spread that out on a Sunday? What's your suggestion?
A number of churches that have thousands of members also have classrooms. And obviously, churches that have classrooms, they can use each class for the 50 people that they are required to have per service. And if they cannot accommodate all the members, then they will have to have a number of services. Some will have 3, 4, or even 5 services, which is going to be taxing and challenging for the one who speaks, unless if it divides the preaching and the sharing of the word of God with other leaders in the church or other pastors if they have more pastors. But it's something that is doable. We also have a sizable building, but also have classrooms that we'll also use to make sure that we can accommodate as many people as possible. And where we cannot, then obviously we'll have multiple services that morning.
And many people around the country, Reverend, who have been planning their weddings throughout this time before lockdown came into effect, I'm sure, are welcoming the news that people can go back to church. What is your understanding of how weddings are going to be conducted?
Well, unfortunately, even with weddings, the minimum or maximum of 50 people, 50 guests has to be observed. But when everybody has been sanitized, the venue is sanitized, and the minister also uses gloves if he's going to touch the people, then I do not foresee a problem. Many of them obviously will have to be innovative. Where there is innovation, we can ensure that everybody who has attended and enjoys the wedding. And those who have other venues, other classrooms, they should also use those classrooms, because as long as you have 50 people within a building, under one roof, it's acceptable. Then you can divide them into other classrooms if you have them around you.
Reverend, just before I say goodbye to you for this evening, in the last few minutes I have with you, how does a church as a business recover from the kind of damage that its finances have seen over the past few months, A, and then B, with all the online church services we've seen popping up as a result of COVID-19 and lockdown? Do you think this is going to affect the number of people coming back to church?
I don't think so. You know, we also had online services. You know, with an online service, you miss hot bodies. You miss the smiles. You miss the hallelujahs that many are saying, because you are just alone or with your family looking into a screen. So I don't think that will hinder people who have been coming to churches not to come anymore, because with online services, you do not have the hot bodies, you do not have the smiles of the people, and you need that. When you go to church, you need the warmth of the people. So we are looking forward to our members coming back, and those obviously we have been serving who are far from the church will continue using also online services to ensure that those who have been enjoying church with us will continue enjoying church.
I appreciate your time in speaking to us this evening. Always a pleasure. Reverend Kenneth Meshwe, the African Christian Democratic Party leader, giving us a reaction to the announcement from earlier President Cyril Ramaphosa saying that churches will be back from the 1st of June under level 3 lockdown, but also saying social distancing and wearing of a face mask is paramount during these religious gatherings, and no more than 50 people are allowed in a venue.
Churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, and other recognized places of worship may resume services, but these will be limited in size to 50 people or less, depending on the space available. Social distancing will have to be observed, and all worshippers and participants will have to wear face masks in line with the current regulations. All religious organizations must put protocols in place for, among other things, thoroughly cleaning and sanitizing places of worship before and after services. Our faith communities must ensure that any religious rituals that carry even the slightest possibility of exposing worshippers to risk should be avoided, and that where they form an essential part of religious practice, that sanitation is paramount. Our religious leaders will be recognized as essential religious frontline workers for purposes of spiritual counseling to members of their faith organizations.
Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa also saying that churches will be having no more than 50 people in a venue at one time. He was addressing the nation this evening as we all gear up for level 3 of the lockdown. Let's continue to get more reaction from this. I'm joined by General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana. Bishop, good evening. Thank you for your time. What is your reaction to the address by the President tonight?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. We are absolutely delighted. I think all faith communities are delighted. We have really, almost like we've been yearning for the opportunity